The undeniable charm of Europe lies in its ancient architecture that fills the city centers. Yet, if you look closely, you'll notice something peculiar. The buildings and houses are packed so tightly that not even a single needle could fit between them. This is a stark contrast not only to our modern cities, but even to the United States, a nation built by those who crossed over from Europe. In historic cities like London, Paris, and Rome, several buildings appear as one continuous structure, resembling a massive fortress wall. Furthermore, these houses are built as close to the roads as possible, ignoring the pollution and noise of the streets. Despite Europe not having a larger population than Asia or the Americas, its city centers boast an incredibly high population density. Why did European cities evolve into this compact form? The roots of this structure go back to the 5th century, when the fall of the Western Roman Empire caused urban life to wither. During this period, Europe was in a state of extreme political and social instability due to the Great Migration of Germanic tribes. The Pax Romana, which had ensured long-term peace, vanished, replaced by an era of chaos. Additionally, the rise of Islam in the Arabian Peninsula meant they virtually controlled Mediterranean trade, leading Europe to shift toward a manor-based feudal system centered on agriculture, causing cities to decay rapidly. It wasn't until the 11th century, 500 years after Rome's fall, that stability returned. The migration stopped. The Mediterranean was reclaimed as Islam weakened, and a milder climate boosted agricultural productivity and population. Ancient ruins were revived into bustling cities, but their character had changed. With the Crusades sparking a golden age of trade, the protagonists of these cities were no longer farmers, but merchants. Naturally, new medieval cities were established near rivers and crossroads where people gathered, transforming trade hubs into urban centers. By the late Middle Ages in the 15th century, Europe saw the rise of massive cities. Constantinople and Paris exceeded 100,000 residents, while Florence, Venice, Milan, and London surpassed 50,000. Across Europe, over 3,000 such cities emerged. However, the Middle Ages were far from peaceful. Until the mid-10th century, Vikings frequently raided coastal cities, while wars between feudal lords and rampant banditry were common, often wiping out hard-earned commercial foundations overnight. To survive, villages had to be fortified with high walls. Inside these walls, the homes of merchants, the workshops of craftsmen, guild halls, city halls to support commerce, and churches to manage accounting and spiritual needs were all packed together. These became the characteristic walled cities of the Middle Ages. But building these walls and digging moats was incredibly expensive and required vast amounts of land, a burden only kings and wealthy nobles could bear. While many cities grew naturally, many were intentionally constructed for a specific reason: business. Kings and nobles realized that a city was a highly profitable venture. They could collect rent from homes and shops, impose transaction taxes on goods sold in markets, and charge a toll at the city gates for outsiders entering. This is where the term toll in toll gate originates. City business was far more lucrative than managing serfs on a farm. This leads us to the primary reason why European houses are so tightly packed. Fortress walls and moats could not be easily expanded as the population grew. Therefore, it was essential to fit as many houses and buildings as possible within the limited space inside the walls. Nothing was more efficient for land and space utilization than shared wall construction. Building one wall to serve two houses was incredibly economical. Since more merchants and craftsmen meant more revenue, kings and nobles had every reason to encourage high density. Merchants also benefited. A larger population meant a bigger market and more craftsmen to produce goods. Moreover, a higher number of residents meant more people to defend the city against enemies. Urban layouts typically placed a market square at the very center, connected to the city gates by wide, straight roads for the movement of goods, while the area outside the square was surrounded by layers of narrow, winding streets. Noblemen and wealthy merchants lived on the roads near the square, while craftsmen and commoners lived further out, yet all resided in shared wall buildings regardless of status. Beyond defense, these maze-like narrow streets also served to confuse invading enemies. In an age without modern heating, joining houses together provided excellent insulation. Even outside of walled cities, shared walls were common due to taxation. Kings and nobles often taxed houses based on the width of their street-facing frontage. In response, citizens built houses that were narrow at the front but long toward the back, often including a private garden or courtyard deep inside for privacy. To maximize this rear space, they built their homes as close to the road as possible, a sharp contrast to cultures that value an open front yard. This influence can still be seen in former European colonies like Singapore and Vietnam. When nobles tried to tax the number of windows, citizens simply blocked them or shared walls with neighbors to eliminate side windows altogether. In Amsterdam, the logic was slightly different. There, the waterways were the roads. Land was divided into tiny, narrow strips so that as many homes as possible could have an entrance directly on the water, allowing residents to board boats immediately upon stepping outside. Since taxes were based on the width of the house facing the water, the houses became even narrower and more tightly packed. Of course, this density brought fatal problems. Without sewage systems, medieval cities often became graveyards due to plagues. And as seen in the Great Fire of London in the 17th century, a single fire could devastate an entire city because the buildings were connected. Noise between walls was a minor annoyance compared to these threats. Despite this, cities remained popular, and living inside the walls became so expensive that only the wealthy could afford it. The term bourgeoisie actually refers to those who lived inside the city walls, the bourg. Eventually, population surges made maintaining walls impossible. In cities like Vienna, Austria, the medieval walls were torn down to create ring roads, with even more buildings constructed along them. Today, these long rows of connected houses, stretching for hundreds of meters, have become a unique and charming characteristic that draws travelers from all over the world.